Hello, it's that time of year again. I've never done this before. It's that time of year. It's the mid-year book tag time. I do like a video with structure because I am very autistic. So tags are my friend. The first question is the best book that I've read so far this year. I've got a couple, because I find it very hard to pick just one for questions like these, so there's going to be more than one for a couple of these, and I'm not going to apologise, and you're going to enjoy having more recommendations. That's a bit pushy. I hope you enjoy having more than one book as a recommendation. There are three that jump to mind. The first is A Dark and Hollow Star by Ashley Shuttleworth. This one mostly because I put it off for 3 years and then read it and gave it 5 stars. It was so much better than I was expecting. I think I was expecting it to be a little more along the lines of Sarah J Maas, in the sense that there would be a bit of an insta-lovey romance line. And don't get me wrong, there is romance in it, but it's so slow burn it doesn't offend me, which is quite nice. And the plot's really well thought out, the world building's intense and intricate, and pulls on a lot of things in mythology that I really enjoy. And overall it was just 5 stars, and I would recommend it to anyone that likes sort of urban contemporary fantasy, something along those lines. I also consider Once and Future Witches one of the best books I've read this year as well. Again, I wasn't expecting much. I was expecting this to be quite dull. It is not dull. It is not dull at all. It follows 3 witchy sisters in New Salem in a sort of adjacent historical period to the Salem witch trials. A bit later on. I can't remember exactly. That sort of area and vibe. They have the suffragette movement intertwined with like the witch movement. No, that's wrong. Witches are a thing in this world, and men are trying to squash witchcraft the same way that they are trying to squash women's rights, essentially. But the people running the suffragette stuff and the people who are fighting for the witch stuff don't necessarily see eye to eye. It's a very powerful book. There's a lot of feminine rage. It's high stakes, it's fast paced. There are some heists in it. There are some really well fleshed out characters. The 3 sisters are by no means clones or copies of each other. They're so distinct. It's gay as well, which is always a nice touch. Highly recommend. And I can't not put Sorcery of Thorns on here because I never reread books. And when I do, I'd never give them the same review that I gave them before, and this was still a 5 star, and I still loved it. And I would still highly recommend it. Sorcery of Thorns is sentient libraries and magical books and demons and slaying things and shit like that. It's good. It's really good. It hits all the buzzwords that I like in a book. Next prompt is the best sequel. Top one for this is definitely A Cruel and Fated Light by Ashley Shuttleworth. This is the sequel to A Dark and Hollow Star. I cannot remember the last time I read a series where the sequel was as good as the first book. There is another book that I'm going to be talking about in this prompt which does the same thing. But apart from that one, I cannot remember the last time I read a sequel that was just as good as the first book. Cruel and Fated Light was also 5 stars. It did have a little slow patch in the beginning, but once it got going, it was so good. And the number of just non-stop reveals and twists and oh my god moments and just sort of general madness that happens in the end of this book makes it. If I had the time, I would reread it, but it's also quite a chunky book, and I've got other books I want to read first, so if I feel like a reread in the future, that one's on my list. But yes, definitely the best sequel I've read this year, closely followed by The Laughing Corpse by Laurel K. Hamilton. This one I feel like is a bit of a cheat because the Anita Blake Vampire Hunter series doesn't feel like a regular series to me. It's got 29 books in it, and it feels like reading a TV show more than anything else. But so far, I think I read through the first 3. The first 3 are really good books, and I can rely on them to entertain me and keep the suspension, keep the tension, keep the tension up. So I feel like that one's like a little honourable mention as well. We do like Laurel K. Hamilton. I just bought the next 7 books in the series because they're like my palette cleansers at the moment, because I can rely on them to be good. So far, I'll be pissed off if that changes. The next prompt is a new release I haven't read yet. The one that springs to mind is Amina Al-Sarafi. That's been sat on my TBR shelf since it came out because I pre-ordered it, which is middle-aged pirate woman goes back to being notorious pirate because one of her old crew needs her or something. Obviously I haven't read it yet, but I've heard lots of good reviews. I'm really, really looking forward to reading it. I just haven't got there quite yet. I've heard lots of good things. So that's top of my list. The other 2 that I am looking forward to that I haven't read yet are Witch King by Martha Wells. Mostly just because of the title. I talked about this one a little bit in my anticipated releases video. It's about a Witch King who gets woken up from a long sleep or a curse. It's been a minute since I read the blurb, but the fact that it's called Witch King makes me want to read it regardless. So that slides us into the next prompt, which is my most anticipated release, so one that hasn't come out yet. Thornhedge by T. Kingfisher. It sounds like it's a retelling of Rapunzel with changelings in it, and fae, and cabbages, because that's in the original Rapunzel story. I love T. Kingfisher when she does fairy tale retellings. All of those are consistently 5 stars for me. And I love changelings as a concept, and I don't feel like I read enough about changelings as a concept, so I'm very excited that she's doing both a fairy tale retelling that involves changelings, and if it's not a 5-star, I might cry. Honourable mentions in this category as well go to Sign Here by, I want to say Claudia someone, which is about a devil character who tries to take down the whole of a family for his own, to get a promotion in hell, I think. I'm remembering these blurbs off the top of my head. It's one of those books that's highly anticipated for me because I heard about it nearly a year ago and went, that sounds great, and put it on my list. And it doesn't come out till like November. I've been waiting so long for this to fucking come out. Is this the one that I think I got that wrong? That was it. I refused to pay 20 quid for the hardcover, which is why I've been waiting for the paperback. So I take back that bit that I just said. It's my own fault I've been waiting this long, but I'm also not paying £20 for a hardback book. I don't even like reading hardback books, so I'm waiting for the paperback, which comes out in September. And also Starling House by Alex E. Harrow, same author of Once and Future Witches. It occurred to me that since I like that book so much, why aren't I reading Alex E. Harrow's backlist? And she's coming out with a haunted house book, Starling House, at the end of this year, which sounds right up my street, so that is also on my most anticipated reads list. I am excited. The next prompt is my biggest disappointment. I have 3 for this category. The first one, we'll do them in the order that I read them. First one is Wolf Song by TJ Klune. This was supposed to be a comforting, heartwarming werewolf book. There will be spoilers in this bit because I can't tell you why it was so disappointing without spoiling it, and I'm angry about it, so I need to tell you. Until there is a completely inappropriate age gap relationship, and I'm not talking like hundreds of years to a teenager, I'm talking 21-year-old with like a 14, 15-year-old. This adult, who we know from age like 14 to early 20s, knows the love interest from the time that they are like 9, and it just read as completely inappropriate because it was very much a older, the main character has learning disabilities. They are described as they're written, because it's first person, they're written as being quite slow thinking. They take time to process things. They don't always understand social cues. In my head, as an ex-special needs teacher, I would probably jump to the labels of autism spectrum with some global development delay, that kind of thing. And they are much older by like 5 or 6 years then this other child who is the leader, the fated leader of this wolf pack that moves in next door. And because the child is this fated leader, all the adults do what he wants to do. Not always, but most of the time. And they let the two of them, essentially, they let this child woo this older protagonist. And it just rubs me up the wrong way so much. It's been a couple of months since I read the book. I've DNF'd it, I got rid of it, because it just made me so uncomfortable. And it was just such a huge disappointment, because I started the book off going, this is a really interesting take on writing from this sort of perspective, and the way that the book was sort of unfolding. It was new and it was interesting, and then it was inappropriate and I hated it. So that was my first big disappointment. My second one was Fevered Star by Rebecca Roanhorse. This is the second book in the Black Sun sequel. Black Sun was fantastic, it was 5 stars. The sequel was not, it was so disappointing and I DNF'd it. It just harped on about the least interesting parts of Black Sun, and lots of people made lots of stupid decisions and I couldn't put up with it, so I DNF'd it. And then the latest disappointment was the book that I forced myself to finish last night, which was Paper and Blood, which is the second in the Ink and Sigil series, which felt like it should have had more plot points. There's a good, the setup is good, the first act is good, second, third and fourth act are all one big long like travel sequence when various people sort of helpfully crop up at the right times and nothing really happens. And then there's a big fight at the end and it was boring. The first book was so good, it was like this intricate mystery where there was lots of different locations and there was moving around and there was mysteries being unfolded and revealed, and this second one was not that. The second one, oh, it was bad. It was bad and it was disappointing, and the only reason I didn't DNF it is because there's a third one coming out and I'm hoping that this one goes back to how good it was in the first book. I'm hoping. I'm not super optimistic at the moment, but I'm hoping. The next prompt is the biggest surprise. The biggest surprise for my reading this year would definitely be Saint Death's Daughter. I did a whole video reviewing this one because it struck me so hard. I was fully expecting this to be a shit book, essentially. And it was not a shit book. It was actually quite good. It was 5 or 4 stars. It was 4 or 5 stars. It blew me away with how unique a premise it was. The themes were really interesting. The world building was really different. And it felt like another one of those books, I read a couple this year, that feel like we're moving into a different genre of epic fantasy that isn't male dominated, that isn't full of war, and that isn't full of like grimdark heroes killing lots of people. Because a lot of the time that is what epic fantasy feels like, at least the ones that I'm reading. So finding a book like Saint Death's Daughter where it's so different and it's weird and kooky and it's got necromancy in it and it feels a bit like the Addams Family if they were living in a completely separate world with separate like religions, and there's so much world building and all the characters are so perfectly fleshed out. They're so different. There's a range of female characters on offer as well, which is always a bonus. It's queer. It is just so good. Slow in the middle. There is a slow bit, but after that it's just so good. So that was my biggest surprise. I was fully expecting to hate it. I thought it was going to be a sort of you know what, I'm not really sure what I thought it was going to be. Maybe something along the lines of A Court of Miracles or something like that, and it completely wasn't. So yeah, highly recommend that book. Next prompt is my favourite new author. I mean Ashley Shuttleworth, just because of the 2 banging 5 stars, Dark and Hollow Star and Cruel and Fated Light. And also Alex E. Harrow, because of Once and Future Witches and the fact that she has more books out and coming out that I am actively very interested in and would like to sort of catch up on her backlog. So yeah, those are the 2 sort of new to me authors that I would like to read more of. The next 2 prompts I'm turning into 1 because we've got favourite new fictional crush and new favourite character. I don't do fictional crushes. That's just not a thing that I do. But what I do have is a character that I'd like to take home, put in my pocket and keep forever. And I think that also falls under the favourite character prompt, which is next. So I'm just sort of combining the two. And that is Buck Foy from the Ink and Sigil series. He is a pink hobgoblin with the filthiest mouth in the world. He gets high off salsa. He likes to steal things. He's very vulgar. He's just so lovable. And he's a hobgoblin. So, you know, bit biased. But yeah, he definitely falls under that category. Next prompt is book that made me cry. Once and Future Witches. Books don't often make me cry, but the end of Once and Future Witches was so powerful, I just had a moment of, oh, there's just so much emotion, it needs to come out my eyeballs for a minute, please. So it did. There you go, gold star for that book. And a book that made me happy, lots of books have made me happy, but the one that stands out is A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. Just because it is so cosy and all the characters are lovely and it's so sort of domestic slice of life in space, and it's long as well, so it doesn't feel too short, and it's just a comforting read. It's just really comforting and I approve. So yeah, that was my mid-year book tag. I will tag the original creators of the tag below. I don't think they're still active on YouTube, but I'll tag them anyway because I got their information from someone else's video who I've now forgotten. I love doing tags. There will probably be more in the future. Do read all of the good books that I talked about because I'm sure you will like them. Yes, that is my recommendation to you. Have a nice day.